I'm going to keep messing with my camera.
Yeah, please do. No worries. This is so informal but fun. So I am excited to talk to you live. I've seen you in a few groups where we did Power Mornings together, didn't we?
We did Power Mornings
And
together.
we've been in a few other groups, I think,
Hmm.
together. And I just love your vibe. So I'm excited when you said yes. And I'm so glad we got the time sorted out because 7 a.m. would have been ridiculous.
I was
How?
thinking, I'll be the one who's going, no, no, don't mind me as I inhale coffee.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I am excited to have you on my show. So, word alchemist,
Word
and I
alchemist.
really loved how you described that. So, tell us a bit about what you do exactly.
So I've got, goodness, over 25 years experience in mentoring and guiding people. I'm I have served for am finishing up 24 years in the military in the US Navy, and in that process I guide and mentored people and did a lot with helping people figure out their own language and what they wanted to say and how to communicate. Um, and in doing so, helped a lot of people transition from being enlisted to officers or into special programs or getting accepted into college and kind of figuring out what their passion was and identifying with that. And in the process, that I determined that how we engage in our own language with ourselves and others is so telling of our internal language is. And so I help people find what their language is and maybe just adjust a little bit so they get more power out of it.
Oh, I love that. And that's so important, for a lot of people. And first of all, just let me say thank you for serving your country.
Oh, thank you.
We don't share the same country, but I have a love of military. My husband's in the military here in Canada. Such an important role. I really appreciate your service. And it's so great that you've been doing that with enlisted members as well, because, especially when you're in a day job or you've done a job a particular way for a long time, you kind of forget how to then sell yourself, for lack of a better term, to other things that you might want to do and other interests you have. So what do you think is the biggest challenge people have in doing this? Because I'm sure I fit into this category sometimes.
Okay, so interestingly enough, there's probably two key things in our lives that we do on a daily basis. One is we highlight the negativity. I wish I had
Yes.
more money. I wish my boss respected me more. Man, it's really early. Why do I have to go into work? Why are my hours so long? And we never focus on all that we have. Like, I have a job. I have a roof over my home. Or over my head. I have some place to sleep. I'm warm in the winter and cool in the summer. And I have friends and people who love me. And I have a car. Maybe it's not the most dependable, but you have a car. Or I have access to public transportation. And the second biggest thing I find is that we use qualifying words like, man, I would really love to take that cruise, but I just don't have the money. Instead, if we could figure out a way to remove but from our language and instead say, I really would love to take the cruise, although I don't really have the money right now, I know I'm going to do it someday soon. You said the same thing, but the second one just was so more empowering to yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Because anything we say after the word but is our excuse why we're not going to do it.
We've
Even
negated it.
if,
Mm-hmm.
exactly, even if money falls into your lap, which I know you've probably had evidence of that. I've certainly had evidence of it. But because you've discounted it, you would then
Mm-hmm.
put your money that fell into your lap for that cruise to something else, maybe paying down a bill. Even though you're on a good payment schedule anyway, there's always the responsible thing to do, for example,
Mm-hmm.
which if we don't take care of ourselves, it's not very responsible at all anyhow. So, and how is changing their language allowing them to feel their power a little bit differently than they would have before? Words are so powerful. So,
Words are so powerful. When we change our language and start to acknowledge all that we have in our lives, we recognize and it more readily see it every single day.
yeah,
And when we empower ourselves that way, we become the people who see the silver lining in every cloud. And when you see the silver lining, suddenly it becomes gold, and then it's platinum, and then you have a diamond life, if you will. because we appreciate all that we have. And when you have that energy set, it's not only mindset, it's energetically. If you always have good vibration, you attract good vibration. I mean, quantum physics will tell you that we're all energy, we vibrate, and what we send out comes back to us.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
changing our language allows us to attract better things into our life, and then people actually want to be around us.
Yeah, it's so true. And do you find that the people that you've worked with have a hard time, once they get the idea around that they need to focus on the positive or the good things in their lives, do they find that they have challenges with other people in their lives around them when they make that shift for themselves?
The most interesting thing is the first thing they do is, instead of teaching that person how to empower themselves, they drag the person back to me and say, tell her what you told me, or tell them what you told me. If you know how to do this, they're like, yeah, 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 but you just do it so much better. It's like, no, 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 guys, you can do this and spread it on your own. It doesn't have to be me. And so at first they doubt their own, if you will, new empowered self. But once they figure out that the power in themselves, in the way that they've grown and accepted themselves, then they're freaking little engines that could do everything. It's just amazing.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think one of the things is that, as we work and influence and work with people, it's really important that we help not only make the shifts in them, but also empower them to do the same thing. Because you're so right. I mean, you and I, or anybody else that's in the coaching world or does anything similar, we can only touch so many people. Of course, I'm sure I'll be on the scale of Oprah someday, and you probably will too. But until
We
then,
hope.
we have a sphere of influence. Yeah, exactly. We have a sphere of influence that is, this big. And, if every second person that we talk to takes this on, then they can make it grow that much bigger. So that's so great. I'm glad that you insist that they do that. Now,
It's the
when
ripple effect.
you're, go ahead, go ahead.
It's the ripple
Sorry.
effect. If we
Yeah.
can cast a stone and it causes ripples, it influences other things. You want to not cast a stone big enough that it's a huge splash, but you want to cast enough that the ripples last and go a long way.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's so true. And I think that, if we're going to really make the kind of change that the world really needs to see, instead of looking at it on the global scale like that, if we just look at it, okay, the next person that I interact with, I'm going to leave a positive impression behind, even if it's not someone that is a client of ours or that we're working with directly. And even that is such a subtle shift. Tell me how you really started to acknowledge this for yourself. Because was this something that you've always done your whole career, or it emerged? Did you find any resistance around it?
Well, so the interesting thing is I have an undergraduate degree in psychology, and that came about because it seemed like my entire life people would come to me and want to share their stories and have somebody to listen and lean on. And that continued after I joined the military. And then I just realized really quickly that not only just being a listening board and a place for somebody to express their options, but sometimes it was just repeating back exactly what they say. And they would say, no, 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 that's not what I mean. It's like, okay, well, what do you mean? What are you trying to say? And then helping them figure out what they actually wanted to say. And from there, it just kind of just kept growing, if you will. It just seemed like more and more people would show up going, I need help. And I go, okay, what do you need help with? And had nothing to do with the actual job I was doing in the military. That's the part that was interesting. I would end up with people who just needed to come and talk, and just being the person who'd listen.
Well, that's
So,
so great that you embraced that then. So, was there any resistance around it though when you started to identify, oh, maybe I can do this as a more structured
oh, for
way,
me?
or
Oh, yeah, for me. Because it was like,
yeah,
no, 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 no. I mean, I'm used to an office job. I want to, I've got the nine to
yeah,
five or whatever the hours are. And the
yeah,
idea that specifically going from doing it in person to potentially doing it online is intimidating. But like you, I thought, wait a minute, my sphere of influence can go from the people I can touch one on one to a much larger field if I can move online.
yeah, absolutely. That's so true. And what started to come up for you when you did that? Because I think that's common for a lot of people.
There's security in
Yeah,
a standard 9 to 5 job. Being an entrepreneur is scary because you're stepping into the unknown. And
yeah.
oftentimes for people, it's oh my goodness, will others resonate with my message and who I am? And
Yeah.
so that comes, I think it's what most everybody has is we have fear. And it's acknowledging that fear and saying, you know, you're there. I'm still going to do this. I'm going to do this scared because this is too important.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. Um, so, what do you think of the idea? And I first heard my mentor say this, but I've heard it in different variations before. Get comfortable being uncomfortable. What do you think about that?
Well, first off, I think it's kind of interesting. It's hard to ever be comfortable being uncomfortable, but you have to acknowledge and accept that you're going to be uncomfortable because you're doing something that's outside of your realm of comfort. But that's how we grow. Once you
Yeah.
step outside your zone of comfort, you grow. Um, and I think we all find our purpose and get closer to
Yes.
it because what we're doing isn't easy, but it's rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so true. And, you know, one of the things that has come up with my clients a lot is the idea that we need to fit a certain mold.
Mm.
So, you know, whether you're a nutritionist, a copywriter, you know, tap dancer, doesn't matter. Um, well, I don't sound like that, or I don't believe in that same philosophy, or I don't do it that way, or I want to say something really kind of controversial. You know, what do you think? What do you tell people who come across that kind of resistance to being outside of the mold, even if stepping into that role is already a stretch for them? What do you say when they come up against that?
You have to be true to yourself. And
Yes.
you and I are very different people. We both went through the same, you know, Power Morning group together, but we approached
Yes.
that technique differently, as did
Yes.
the director of that group. She had a completely, her implementation of the same process was completely different. So I think what it really comes down to is if you aren't true to yourself, nobody's going to listen to your message
Yeah.
because you don't resonate. If I tried to be, I don't know, Rebecca Dixon, I could not be Becky Dixon because I'm not her. I don't know if
Yeah.
I could pull off the red dress she wears in that really great picture either. But
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, it's so
that's
true.
not who I am. I'd have to be somebody else. And so, like yourself, you're doing the mindset mastery and you're talking to people about mindset because that's what really draws you in and obviously draws in a lot of other people, but you're being true to yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we have to be ready to for the understanding that that may also evolve.
Hmm.
Because when I started the mindset work, it looked a little bit differently than it does now. And I'm about
Hmm.
to evolve into something else as well. But I'm embracing it because it's going to be, you know, I'm going to continue to resonate with what my message is as I move through it. Do you find that your experience in the military has really given you, um, you know, the people aspect that you can then apply to the online world that maybe others may not have?
In what manner?
Well, the fact that you've had to deal with so many different personality types and in such a rigid structure too, because you know, as different as people are, when you're in the military, there's
Oh, we
still
got a
a
visitor.
system and process. Hi, little kitty. That's so cute.
Yes, I mean, I think I'm really lucky because I've dealt with people who who literally come from every walk of life. I'm not
Yeah,
walking into corporate America or the banking world and I'm dealing with people who deal with money. I'm dealing with people who came from, you know, inner cities, who have family members who are in gangs, to people who come from a wealthy background, to everybody in between. You cross socioeconomic, political, religious, pick something. You know, my first boss was somebody who was born and raised in the Philippines and spoke Tagalog. And I had, I spent the first couple of weeks going, I'm sorry, what? I can't understand you. I'm sorry, what? And he
yeah,
spoke great English. It was just, it wasn't an accent, me being born and raised in Idaho, I'd never heard. So it took me a while to get used to it. But the
yeah,
interesting thing is that seeing his culture gave me a huge appreciation for things that I had grown up with. And at the same time, you kind of identify things that you wish were different.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
it's a really unique opportunity to get to see not only the world, but the country that you're serving in, or in my case, I've been stationed in both Spain and Denmark, and getting immersed in those cultures is fascinating to see that and compare it with
Yeah.
the US culture. So it's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, that's so great. I mean, I always say that the military brings together. It's almost like this mini cosmic
Hmm.
or this mini universe upon itself. Like it's a representation of different parts of at least that country, and if not in your case, a couple countries that come together. And it's so great to see that. And you know, the systems that they have in place work very well, so that of course, under the worst case scenario in a war, the people can line up as they need to.
Hmm.
How do you think then taking systems in business and doing something that is really kind of outside of the box, like there's no system for what you do necessarily. It's very intuitive, it's very ingrained in who you are. And, you can speak a little bit more to that, with my next question, I'm sure. But how do you then apply that kind of systematic world to the fluid business world that you're in now and find that comfort zone for you? Or, and this would apply for others that leave a corporate job or, anything like that.
So part of the work I had to do, oh, I am so sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. Don't worry. No worries at all.
I did not shut my phone on. I apologize.
That's
Okay.
okay. That's
So you
okay.
got to see
No
my
worries.
cabinet there. Okay. So what I had to learn in the military was my job skills required I identify with my, best way to say it's my masculine side. The male, I can go
Hmm.
get this. I can do this. I can, I can take upon other things. What I didn't do, I'm just going to shut that off.
That's okay.
Why is that doing that? I'm so sorry. Okay.
Don't even worry about it. It's all
You gotta
good. You're
love
good.
you gotta love Apple all hooked together. But to counteract the masculine energy of the military, I found myself leaning more into intuition and empathetic feeling, and started to look for alternative healing and meditation and yoga, and looking into things like how does nutrition affect my ability to do my job and my emotions, and if I get enough sleep, does that mean that I can handle the stress more? And do I need to run more? Do I need to do more walking and meditation? And so it became a balance of the yin and the yang, the masculine and the feminine.
Love that.
And then as I transitioned out, I realized that my feminine side, which had always been there, was becoming more and more to the forefront, because I didn't want to continue to have the aggressive masculine energy that was required to survive and succeed in the military. I really wanted to get back in touch with the caring side that goes, the nurturing side that's associated with the feminine energy. But at the same time, the masculine has such purpose in business, in the
Yeah.
entrepreneur world. And although coaching is very much nurturing, you need the structure that goes with that, because somebody's still
Absolutely.
got to set up the appointments and figure out how
Yeah.
to make Blab work when it won't let you log on. And,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
and how do you, the business side of it still needs some of that masculine energy, but tying in the feminine side of it, because I'm not somebody who's going to stand there and say, if you don't do it my way, you're not doing it right, because it's not who I am. I'm going to ask you, what's the best way that I can serve you to reach your highest power?
Yeah, absolutely. I really like that too, because I've heard and seen some coaches or some people that are promoting, get in touch with the feminine side and, completely ignoring the masculine side. And, my mentor talks about this in the universal laws. I've studied this as well. You can't have one without the other. It just doesn't work that way. And to completely shut out one side, or even to have the desire to completely shut it out, I think it speaks to a deeper issue that we need to address, either within ourselves or, coming from the person that's trying to push that on us. Embrace it if that's what works for you. I'm not trying to say one thing works better than the other, but I think it's really short-sighted to do that. So I love that you have learned to embrace both sides. I'm sure it wasn't easy at first, especially being in the military, because it's designed to be that way. And I'm not even sure that it should be anything different, but you know, how tough did you find that at first?
It was interesting. Some of my male counterparts resisted to it, but the people that I worked with actually appreciated, to the point that, this is
Mm.
hilarious. I ended up firing a young lady at one point in time. I said, You're just not doing your job. You need to go somewhere else and work for a while. And she called me
Right.
2 years later and said, where are you going next? I want to come work for you. And I said,
Oh, that's
but I said, I
interesting.
fired you. And she says, yeah, yeah, yeah. But you drew a line in the sand, which is, of course, very masculine. She goes, but I knew where the line was. And I always knew that you were doing it for my own good and to
Yeah.
make me better. She goes, and so I want to come work for you again and learn. And so it was really interesting. At first, the people around me resisted, at least some of the male coworkers. But in the long run, what happened was the people I worked with knew that I was invested in them. And
Yes.
so the return on that investment was that as I think I grew as a leader.
Yeah,
And that was pretty
absolutely.
cool. So
That's so great. That's a really great example of how that works too. Now, tell me a little bit more about the intuitive side that you had. And you said sometimes that when we were leading up to the show, that sometimes messages will come through for the person. Tell me a little bit about that. I love it. I haven't, when I'm working with a client, I know what questions to ask, and I'm sure that's coming from my intuition, but I don't call myself an intuitive yet. But I love this idea that that can happen so readily for people. So tell me about that.
it's really interesting. And it's almost like it's not a second voice in your head, but it's almost like it's a knowing. And it's not
Yeah.
anything that I feel like I've come up with. It's almost like somebody's tapping your shoulder going, hey, hey, ask this. Hey, tell them this. Hey, bring this up. And you're like, okay, all right, I got it. Let me ask this question. And that's what I find often it's sometimes easier to hear a message coming from another person than to listen to your own. I say there are guides because there's no way
Yes.
I'm sitting inside your head right now telling you this. It's saying, hey, this is where I think you should go next. But if I come to you and I say, hey, I really get this impression that somebody else is saying this or that this is one of your guides, if somebody's receptive, oftentimes the guides will speak up and say something. And sometimes they're just really quiet. So
Yeah.
it's not a
Yeah,
guarantee,
absolutely.
but I always try to honor it when it comes in and speak to people. And if somebody's really resistant, but the guides are really insistent on speaking, I just have to figure out a way to couch it so that the person doesn't feel like it's something too woo woo. Because, in certain cases, people are a little bit intimidated by it, and it can be. So,
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good way to describe it, and also to just, simply put it out there. This is, for a lot of people, what the heck do you mean you're hearing voices? But that's not really what it is. It's more
mm-mm.
really just a knowing, like you said, that, that needs to be shared. And, I know that I found when I asked the question, it's not necessarily acknowledged that it's come, well, at least I haven't acknowledged that it's coming from something else, but there's just a calm and a comfort because the people feel so helped and guided the way they need to be. For you, have you had anyone really like freak out and then be like, oh my goodness, like that was so spot on? That I'm sure you've had.
it was really funny. I had a coworker's husband who we were talking about what he wanted to do career wise, and he was saying something crazy, and I can't even remember what. And we just sat and talked for a while, and he goes, "You just really need to get out of my head." And I looked at him and I was like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Because I feel like you're sitting inside my head, talking to me, telling me things that I already know." And I went, "Okay, okay."
Yeah,
So
there it is.
yeah,
That's so great. That's great. And that he acknowledged it but didn't shut down, because I think that's the other balance that we come across as well, is especially when you're trying to push someone past their comfort zone or opening them up to a new idea. They may come to you initially open, but how do you dance that line between pushing them or introducing something that's really kind of radical for them and keeping them from shutting down?
ooh, and I've had people shut down on me before, and usually it's just more of a think on that. If it's too much, we can pedal back and see what's going on. Um,
Yeah.
but I always think of it sometimes an idea or a concept has to marinate in your mind for a while until you get
Yeah.
comfortable with it. And once you get comfortable with it, then you can acknowledge it and take it on board and say, okay, this is probably something that I can do. But change is scary, and
Yeah.
big change is really super scary. But it's amazing how times just something really small can be devastatingly frightening to somebody because it's that first step.
Yeah.
Once you're on the path and you're walking, somebody says, "Hey, turn left and go do this," and you go, "Okay." But if you're standing at the path going, okay, I can do this. Yeah, I can do this. It's scary as all get out to take that first step and start changing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point for people to keep in mind as well, because anything that's going to be new, your fear pattern or your protective pattern in your subconscious that's been there since you were 8 months, whatever it
Mm-hmm.
um, is going to be triggered and is going to, oh, no, 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 you got to stay safe here. There's lions out there, or there's that dog that chased you, or that person that laughed at you in class. Um, so you have to be careful, stay where you are. And on the flip side of it as well, sometimes it's that small little thing that comes through, or something that you've channeled or you've just identified in someone else, that can make all the difference in what they needed to hear to make a complete 180 change. Have you experienced that as well?
It is. I had a young lady I was working with, and she could not figure out how she could complete her degree and move her career forward. She says, I need to do X, Y, and Z. And it's like, okay, what's stopping you? And she goes, well, this. And I said, well, why is that stopping you? She goes, well, it just is. And I said, okay, well, how can we back that up so it's no longer a roadblock, but is just something you push aside? And she came back and she said, well, I'd never thought that I could actually, what she needed to do was transfer to a new school. And I said, well, have you looked at any
Right.
other schools? And she said, no. I said, well, let's look right now. Let's pull up the computer
Yeah.
and start doing some looking. And we didn't actually find what she was looking for, but at that one session, but she came back later and said, I found XYZ and now I've got a path to go on,
Yeah.
and I've decided here's my backup plan, and I'm going to do this. And it was like, okay. And like you said, it was just that one little step, and it was getting over the
Absolutely.
hurdle of I can't because of.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's like, like when you were describing what you do at the beginning, this idea that you help people change their language and the words they're using to give them their power. It's the same thing. If we've always had something as an excuse or a reason, I wrote a blog or a piece about it, and I said excuses are like assholes. We all have them, and the
Mm-hmm.
longer we use those excuses, they become reasons not to do something. Just like
Mm-hmm.
she had programmed that she, oh, well, I can't. And when you get challenged on that, it's a new way of looking at it. That's so great. I'm so glad that you do this work. It gets me so excited when I talk to people that help them do that. And when you're working with someone, what is, your favorite part of the process?
Oh, when they can see their own success and when they feel empowered, when they walk away thinking, you know what, I can do whatever my goal was. I can reach what I wanted to reach.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's so great. We have someone that just popped on. Hi, Ken. I see you joined us. Welcome.
Welcome in.
Um, yeah, yeah. I think that's so great. Oh, thanks. Thank you, Ken. So please let us know, Ken, if you have any questions. When you're working with someone and they're new to this idea of, changing the words and focusing on the positive, because there is so many people that focus on the negative or what they don't have. Do you find that sometimes they're repeating the same pattern, even though they think that they've fixed it? Yeah. And what is the exercise you work them through so that they, realize that they need to catch themselves doing it?
Well, the really interesting thing is somebody will correct one area of their life and then they'll use the same excuse somewhere else. And they just keep
Mm,
doing it over and over again. It's like, if you have a fear over, I don't have enough money to do X, Y, and Z. And uh, for example, I'd really like to go get my nails done, but I just don't feel like I should spend the $15 every week. It's like, okay, well, why are you getting your nails done? Well, I do it because I want to take care of myself. Well, what else can you do to take care of yourself if you don't feel like the money's there right now? And then watching somebody repeat why they can't do something else because there's no money, or you fix it in one area and it comes back up again. And so part of it is just saying, hey, do you realize it's the same reason? You just are reframing
yeah,
it now. And now, instead of saying I don't shouldn't spend the money on myself to go do this, now you're saying I have to stay in my job because I get paid well. It's the same fear of money
right.
and lack. So how do you get over that? How do you say I have enough, or acknowledge it and move on and say, you know what, it's going to be tighter, I'm going to adjust what I do. So part of it is just keep
Yeah,
I don't want to say calling them on it, but just keep bringing it to their attention that, hey, this is the same thing. You're just reframing it and applying it from a different direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also as we work through those blocks and, um, the reasons to stop disguise themselves as something else.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all our subconscious programming, but it works and, in a different way. And we've talked about this in a few groups, but this idea, like when you're really going to bust out of your comfort zone, someone will get sick or
Mm-hmm.
really, really tired, or they'll have this other emergency that appears in their life. It's so funny. And, upper limit problem that Gay Hendricks talks about. Thanks, Ken.
Thanks, Ken.
That, Gay Hendricks talks about it, the upper limit problem. There's other people that have talked about it as well. Have you experienced that or with your clients or yourself?
I think we all have. And
Yeah,
sometimes we don't call them an upper limit problem because it doesn't seem like it's that high up. We're like,
right.
oh, like I am struggling right now with setting up MailChimp. It's not hard to do, but I am so resistant to it. Why am I resistant to it?
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah,
It's not an upper limit problem, but it's something that we do because it's the next step. The
yes,
next step in growing your business is doing, hey, this is something I need to automate instead of doing it all on my own. And so it's amazing. And people always say it's an upper limit, but I think there are little tiny roadblocks along the way that, like you say, you kind of hit a little bit of your comfort zone. For me, a complete upper limit would be the whole, hey, I'm in bed sick for 3 weeks because you've knocked yourself
yeah,
out. But if you look around every single day, when you got up this morning, did you think I'm going to need 2 cups of coffee or is it a 3 cup day?
yeah,
And
absolutely.
if we acknowledge that we run into those things and we can get over them every single day, the small ones, when you get to the bigger ones, when you really reach that upper limit, it's not quite as scary because you can look back and say, but I've overcome this and I've overcome that. And they were smaller hurdles, but they're kind of training for this bigger one.
Yeah, I love that. And it's so true because, and I really like that idea, actually. I might even quote you on it. This idea that it's, your upper limit is not necessarily at your end goal. It could be, the next step that you're going to take. And, I certainly hit it when I was, oh goodness, turning my paperwork over to a bookkeeper.
Yes.
Organizing my receipts was sheer and utter torture. I put it off. I paid in full, and I probably put it off for 4 months before I
Mm-hmm.
actually sat down to do it. And it was ridiculously easy. I've done it in my government job. It was a joke to be stuck on that. But I had this idea from when I was a kid. I wasn't good with money, so I couldn't manage my own money. Are you kidding me? Like, I've balanced budgets so much bigger
Mm-hmm.
than that, right?
Exactly.
But it became a real block. So the same thing with MailChimp. No doubt you can figure it out, but it's just something that is going to be there and sit there and nag you a little bit until you actually break through and do it. I really like that idea too, to just keep going towards it.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me, what is your favorite way to get into this mode? I know we talked a lot about this in the Power Mornings, but what do you need to, like, what is your favorite way to reset or to, align yourself with how you want to feel for the day or before you work with a client or anything like that?
So I do a couple of gratitude processes, if you will. I try to name 2 to 3 things at minimum every day before I get out of bed that I'm grateful for. And,
Yeah.
the biggest one is, okay, I actually got out of bed without something breaking this morning. Because I went through a series where it felt like every time I turned around, I was getting injured. So, so that's kind of my joke one now. But there's been mornings, visiting with family and friends and waking up and being, you can smell the coffee. So I am grateful somebody else has made coffee this morning.
Yes.
And it's just that starting and acknowledging in the positive day. And I end my day in the same way. I sit down and I acknowledge what I'm grateful for. And I'm not going to lie, there's some days that it's just been really rough, that your gratitude, something like, I'm really grateful that my boss left me alone today, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
But you have to have something
Yeah.
to find the positive. And if you try for 2 to 3 at minimum, sometimes you can come up with 20. It really kind of changes your mindset. And so whenever I sit down and talk to a new client or somebody, my first thought is, okay, I need to be centered so that I can focus on them and not whatever's going on in my own life, because I'm here to serve
Hmm.
their highest good, and how can I help them? So,
Yeah. Yeah, that's so great. And it's so true. I mean, we're all human, so we bring our own human
mhm.
to each encounter we have. So taking that minute to just kind of, okay, I'm really grateful for where I am today. And something you mentioned earlier too, when you were talking about changing someone's language, focusing on what they have and what they don't have. I read this in a book, and I want to say it's Napoleon Hill, but I'm not sure. It could have been Wallace D. Wattles as well. But it was this idea that if you feel like you have nothing and all you have is bills and no money and whatever, think about an insurance company that goes through and insures people. They insure parts of the house, or they insure people's body parts for
Mhm.
that matter. So if you have two functioning legs and arms and whatever it is, try to evaluate that on your list of the assets that you actually have in your life, and it gets so much better. And I heard another extreme example of someone who said, you want to know abundance? Go lay in the grass and count the blades of grass. That is abundance. And I thought, oh, how simple and how boiled down is that? But it's so true. If you did that, how abundant would you feel?
So years ago, I read somebody addressing paying bills, and it was somebody who was really not making a lot of money. And as they sat
Mm.
down, every time they wrote out a bill to pay their electricity or their rent or whatever it was, the person wrote thank you and said thank you in their mind. And as they wrote them out, they kept telling themselves, this is proof and gratitude for things that I've already received in my life. So it's payment for something you've
Mm-hmm.
received, as opposed to feeling like, man, why do I got to pay my cable bill? It's like, well, you know what? Last month, the cable that I paid for, I watched my favorite show, or I did whatever. My cell phone allowed me to, you know, use a map app while I was out to find a new restaurant or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So if you view it instead as a payment for basically the benefits and all the good that you've already received, so no, it's no longer a bill. It's you're showing gratitude back to the universe for what you've already received.
Yeah, that's so true. It's so key. And I think that that's something that we take for granted a lot is, the fact that you can pay that bill, even if you're just swimming in debt, the fact that you can send $20 to someone, being grateful for that is a really great way to change the conversation in your head, and, sets a different vibe that you're putting out there towards the universe. Do you find that that is a practice that you find hard to get people to understand the mechanics behind it, or are they pretty open to this idea? Do you have to like tell them it's something else before you reveal really what it is?
You have to work with them because people view money as either or, as opposed to it
Yeah.
really is an and. And if you get them to change this to an and function and not either or, either I buy this
Yeah.
or I do that. If you make it an and,
Yes.
with this money, it allows me to do this and this and this.
Yes.
It really changes the mindset. But it takes a while because we're really programmed through advertisement and media and even childhood. Your parents say, here's your allowance, you can only buy.
Yes.
And we,
And
we
that's so subtle, but that is exactly the actual programming that you have to get to for yourself. That's so key. Do you find that it's hard for people to acknowledge when they find out that it's something that's been there since their childhood? I had a really hard time acknowledging that the programming. I can hear my mom's voice telling me I'm not good with money, and my sister was the saver, right? So she was always going to have money. And my mom meant well. I did spend everything I got, but I always thought that there was going to be more. So now I've been able to reframe it that way, but I was really resistant putting my finger on that because it meant that I was not, I wasn't really, but I was blaming my mom. Do you find people have resistance around something like that?
they do, because
Yeah.
either you trust and you love your parents, or you had the world's worst childhood. But our parents are
Right.
human, and they pass down to us what was taught to them. And
Yes, exactly.
we went through, there have been depressions and recessions and lots of money issues that the current generation of parents and grandparents have taught, because they went through extreme poverty. It was worldwide. And we are lucky to be in Canada, the United States, where that's not really the case so much, at least for a great portion of the people. Um, but our mindset, and again, it's an either or. Either you're throwing your 16-year-old daughter the elaborate party where you're giving her a Range Rover, or you're going to McDonald's. We don't find the in between. And we're taught that,
Right.
on one hand, we're taught we should save for the future, but then all of our advertisements and everything we see in media and culture is buy, 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 buy.
Yes.
And so it's an ongoing mindset change, because we have become a culture, specifically in the United States, but more so in the Western part of the world, of we're a fast food culture. We want the fast food attitude for everything. We want more, we want it now, and we want to supersize it for $2. And that's what we want.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it doesn't matter if it's not good quality, because we'll just throw it out and get a new one in 2 weeks or 2 years or whatever it is. I mean, especially if you look at the model, and, don't fault them. They're one of the biggest companies, but that's the way Apple runs. Even how many times have I been frustrated by their bloody chargers that just split at the end so that I can't use the bloody thing anymore?
You mean like
and buying a cheaper charger doesn't work.
these that don't fit in anybody's ears? Yeah. Who designed these?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Shaped like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's Ken just pointed out a good point here in the chat. He said, but the world is abundant, so shouldn't we have what we want? We absolutely should, Ken.
But Ken,
what do you think about that, Jennifer?
You do have what you want, but you have to be grateful for what you have. But everybody keeps focusing on the law of attraction. If I just want it enough, abundance will come to me. Well, there's more corollary laws that go with it. You have to take some action to show that you want to do that. You can't say I want a car and not go look for a new car. You can't.
Yeah.
And that's where I think we miss, is we just get focused on where's the attraction. And there's plenty of abundance in the world, but we don't acknowledge abundance that we already have. Did you feed yourself today? Did you have heat? Did you have cool? Was your family fed? Do you have a job? That's abundance. And when we don't acknowledge that abundance, oh yeah, exactly. You can't reward those who aren't willing to do some sort of the work to show that they acknowledge the abundance they have. Because gratitude and love and joy are all very high energetically emotions. And when you're in that mindset and that emotional state, you attract more abundance. You don't know anybody who's really rich who's not doing work in some way to make money, to do things. Everybody's doing work. They're not just sitting back in their easy chair going, I want to be a millionaire. It doesn't work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really good point, Ken. I'm absolutely, if the fast food way of life works for people, then great. But I think what doesn't work about that equation is that a lot of times it's not based on abundant ideas. It's based on more, that's not the same as abundance. So I like the idea of focusing on what do you have now, what do you want, and what steps do you need to take to go get it. I have this little experiment with my kids, and I have 4 kids, and the youngest one, Anthony, he's the easiest to kind of go along with some of this because, I haven't programmed him the same as I did my girls. Shouldn't think of it that way, but hey, let's own up to it. And, this idea that I've just the other day put a Mercedes on my vision board. I'm no way a car person. I could care less really, but I'm like, you know what? That makes me feel great. The idea that I'm going to drive a Mercedes one day. Well, I told him about it. And now everywhere we go, we see Mercedes. Now that's, sure, but we're not necessarily even looking for it. And it's just this idea that now I can see how much there is around me. It's so great to drive. There's so many models. It's really fun to think of it that way. Now, when I go see, I am going to go to the dealership and figure out which one I'm going to get. But 2 weeks after I put it on my vision board and I started talking to my son about it, this postcard came in the mail with 3 different types of Mercedes and what the payment plans were for them. I have never received a postcard from Mercedes in my life. And I've been in this house for 8 years, so it's not like I would just, new address on this mailing list. And I thought, thank you, universe. Yep. I hear ya. I got it. So if we do it from an abundant place,
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's where it makes it easier. So there's nothing wrong in wanting that. Like, Ken's pointing out, the world is abundant. We can have anything we want, but you can't just want it. You have to kind of do things that are going to go get it. How do you separate the idea from, work hard, hard, hard to get something? Because that was a big thing for me and a lot of my clients. If I'm not working really, really hard, it's not worth it, or I'm not going to get what I want.
So you've got to reach the point where you're not working so much that, or I should say, you work enough to do the work that's necessary to get what you want. But if you work to the point that you're exhausting yourself, because we often work so
Yes.
hard that we can't get what we actually wanted. Like, hey, I'm working more so that I can spend more, I can have more money to take care of my family and spend more time with them. But now I'm working so much that I'm never home with my family, and I can buy them nice things, but I'm not there. Or, I really wanted a great vacation, so I did overtime, but now I'm so tired that the idea of, when I go on my vacation, all I want to do is sleep. So,
Yeah,
so you've got to
absolutely.
find a balance between the quantity of what you want in your life and your quality of life. And some people aren't
Yeah,
really willing to
absolutely.
say, now, if a new car came to you that wasn't a Mercedes, but you felt great driving, but for whatever reason, financially, or it was a better color, or it was a hybrid, or what else, would you walk away from the car?
No, 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 that's exactly true. I mean, it's really the idea of how I would feel driving the Mercedes. Like I said, I'm not a car
Right.
person, so it doesn't really matter, but it's like a different feeling
Mm-hmm.
than, but now I get into my vehicle. I have really great vehicles now. But I get into them now and I'm like, oh, I'm so excited about how this is driving today, because it's the same idea. I want to know what it's going to feel like to drive the luxury car versus the car I have now. Well, I'm going to be really excited about the car I drive now, because I want to have that feeling now
Mm-hmm.
behind any wheel, so that then I'm ready to receive that car when it's on its way to me.
But if you drove your car more now, if you worked it harder, would it make it any better than the car
Mm-hmm.
it is today?
No,
Okay.
no, no, no.
So does it make it sometimes it just doesn't make sense to work harder to get to the goal you want,
Yeah,
because what you
yeah,
have to
absolutely.
sacrifice to get there is just too extreme.
Yes, exactly. And the other thing is that by thinking it has to come to us hard, we miss those subtle clues along the way that makes it so much easier. And then you get this big whammo hit in the head and you're like, oh, I wasn't supposed to be on this path. Well, you missed the sign back there that said, hey guys, turn this way. I love that. There was someone actually I spoke to, I don't even remember who it was, but one of their clients was manifesting something and needed to manifest a certain amount of money. And they were going to a conference and they needed money for their travel and whatever. It turned out when they got there, their name was on the list for free room, like to go with the conference, like on the A list or whatever it was.
Wow.
And yeah, exactly. But she thought she had to manifest the actual money. So she had her name taken off the list and paid for her room. No, no, no. It doesn't always come in the form of cash. It can come in the form of something else.
Uh-huh.
So same thing if we're open to the signs. Like I was open to the idea that a Mercedes is going to be on my list and a postcard showed up.
Mm-hmm.
What am I going to deny the fact that that was just a coincidence? No, I don't think it was. Like it really is something that's lining up to say, yeah, you can have that. And it's so subtle, but taking that and then applying it into other areas, it makes things seem so much more abundant. And then you're focusing on that versus the other stuff.
But it's exactly what you said. It isn't always the money. So making, oh, what is his name? The gentleman who does the Notes from the Universe, the Tut Club. It's going to come to me in a minute.
Yes.
He talks about,
Mike Dooley.
there we go. Thank you, Mike Dooley. The cursed house.
Yeah.
We focus
Yes.
so much on,
Oh,
I need X, Y, and Z. And he applies it. He would say, okay, you want to drive a car that makes you feel fabulous. Maybe it's not a Mercedes. Maybe it's something
yeah.
else. But we're so focused on the Mercedes that when a Lexus shows up on your doorstep, you're like, nope, it's not a Mercedes. I can't take it.
No, can't have it.
Can't
Yeah.
have it. And I think we do that with the work harder concept too, is we're so focused on the houses. Okay, if I just work harder and I do this, then it's all going to come together for me.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
what happens if your boss gives you, I don't know, a scholarship to go to a conference that you really need that's going to up your job scale or your job abilities, that in 6 months you're eligible for a raise? Who knows?
Yeah, absolutely. And also the idea of the how. Sometimes because we don't know how,
Mhm.
we don't take the step at all. Instead of trusting, okay, if I take this first step, I don't need to figure out the rest. Things will be put in my way so I can do it. I know that one time I was traveling back from, I don't even remember where I was, North Carolina, I think, and I had to fly through DC, and there was a mix up with the planes. I had to change airplanes. Then there was a layover in Montreal, which is really only 2 hours from my house. And I was stuck in a restaurant, bar, or whatever it is at the airport. And I was really kind of, grumbly about my day, and I'd missed the kids and something. And then I said, wait a minute, why am I supposed to be here right now instead of focusing on the negative? I immediately had 3 conversations with the 2 people sitting beside me and the bartender, got 3 great leads for contacts for potential work in the
Mhm.
future. Really helped this woman get over this relationship issue she was having, that completely, like, she was like sat back for a minute. She was like, holy shit. Like, I've been worried about this for as long as I was. But that was just refocusing and looking at, okay, why am I supposed to be here right now? Have you had things like that happen, or can you talk about how you help clients realize that that really is where you're supposed to be?
So, a real personal experience, I got assigned to an aircraft carrier, and it was a rough 2 years. It was hard work, long hours, long days, and I could not figure out why did I get this assignment, because it felt like it was a career ender. Personally, it impacted my personal life, my family life, all of it, until I was getting ready for my tour to end and move to the next one. And I had 5 separate people across different areas of the command come to me and tell me that my being there made the tour enjoyable, and I was the person who helped them survive and get through it. And so
Yeah.
that was my mind shift. At that point, my mindset went from this wasn't about me. I was there to help somebody else. So although I didn't
Absolutely.
necessarily feel like it was the best for me, it really in the long term helped me grow in huge ways, and really make life better for others. So now I consider it one of my best assignments because of that.
Oh, that's so great. I love that story. It's so true. I mean, really, there are no mistakes. You shouldn't regret things. Everything, every challenge, and I don't even like to use the word failure, but every setback, failure, everything like that is really just a lesson that we didn't get the first time, that maybe we just need to look at again. I think that's so important. We have about 5 minutes left. Ken, I don't know if you want to drop on live to ask any questions. Um, Feel free if you do. But how can people get in touch with you, Jennifer, to work with you or
Okay.
know about what you're doing?
Okay. So my website is, and I'll put it over here, is
Yeah, that would be awesome.
jenniferevejohnson.com. Um, and it's a fairly, actually it's jennevejohnson.com. Sorry, I had to change it because there's a lot of us in the world. Um,
There
there
are.
are, there's so many of us. And it's a relatively new website, as I am, moving from the in physical world to the online world. And so it's still, I've got to do some more tweaking on it, but it's getting there. And I'll put a contact email in the block too, that somebody can reach out to me. But it's all about getting clear on really what you want to do and your choices of words. And it's very interesting if you just sit with a friend one day and ask them to repeat back what you're telling them. You'd be amazed at the amount of time that you're communicating things that you didn't think you were actually communicating, and it's not what you meant.
Yeah,
And so it's,
yeah, absolutely.
and like we talked about, it's all about gratitude and appreciating what you have. And then, remembering that first you got to take care of yourself before you can take care of others.
Oh, I love that. That's so great. And actually, that's a really good exercise for people. I hope anybody that listens to the repeat of this, get someone to repeat back what you said, which is really just what we're doing
Mm-hmm.
in coaching as well. I mean, we're doing more than that. I shouldn't make a light of it. It's a really powerful job to have. But to have someone repeat back what you've said and realize, really, oh my gosh, I said that. That's what I sound like. That's not what I meant at all. So, it's a really good reframe for us. And if you don't have anyone that you trust, or you can't do that, I'm sure speaking into, a video recording or something like that does it. I know the first few times I did videos, I'm like, what the hell were you trying to say? But it was really just getting over the idea that I was going to be recorded that way. And I'm really quite comfortable now doing it. So I love those points, Jennifer. It was so amazing to talk to you. I can't believe we haven't talked live before. You form these relationships, or this connection with people online, and then when you actually get to see them and talk to them live, that's why I love Blab so much, and doing interviews. It really kind of changes, it just ups it a little bit. So thank you so much for being my guest and being patient at the beginning with the mix up there.
And thank you so much, Laura, for having me on. It has been just amazing getting to talk to you face to face and get to know, and fascinating how we all really have similar mindsets.
Thank you, Ken,
Thanks,
for
Jen.
hanging in here with us. I love it. I'm glad you got something from it. And you know what? Thank you once again for your service to your country. It's so important. I think it's, one of the positions in our world that is undervalued. So I can't thank you enough for that. And that you're taking something from that and bringing it into the online world. I think we're all going to be blessed for that. So thank you so much, Jennifer. And, we'll see each other in groups, no doubt.
Okay, thanks. All right.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.